our live stream. And I will call this meeting to order and ask for a resolution to appoint a presiding chair at the meeting, please.
I'll move that.
Who would you like to appoint?
Director Rainbow. I'll second that.
Call the question.
You can ask me first.
I don't think we have to.
Can we have, can we have an election?
We couldn't tell anything.
We're not.
Motion is carried and I'll hand it over to you.
Let's see.
I noticed that. So, call this meeting to order again. And we would like to recognize that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Lillooet Nation. Have a motion to approve the agenda, please. Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Pettingill. Opposed, motion carries. There is no closed meeting, so there's no right of report from closed meeting, which brings to number 5, the allocation. Marnie Simon and Dr. Jim Fuller. Over to you.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Fuller, and I'm Marnie Simon from the Pemberton Healthcare Foundation. I'm the chair, current chair. So I'll just read out an introduction, I think. Can you hear me? Am I speaking too softly? Okay. So it has been recognised by the physicians, the nursing staff and clients of the Pemberton Healthcare Clinic, as well as the board of the Pemberton and District Healthcare Foundation, that the provision of quality care for our communities has reached a really critical breaking point. Lack of space to accommodate needed services, aging and outdated equipment are just two of the many problems that the staff face every day. Dr. Fuller and myself have discussed with Mayor Richmond and Russell Mack of the SSRHD, plus many levels of the Vancouver Coastal Health Management, with the purpose of strengthening relationships and advocating for critical equipment and facility expansions. And we've done this over the last few months. To date, we've been unable to secure commitment to move forward with short-term or long-term plans to begin to raise money for immediate facility expansions to fit our overcrowding and equipment needs. Of equal importance is to begin a campaign to raise funds for building a new and significantly expanded facility to meet the ever-growing healthcare needs of our rapidly expanding community. So we're taking this opportunity to bring awareness to your committee of these things, as well as seeking your commitment as a partner in beginning a capital campaign to reach the long-term goal of building a new or expanded healthcare clinic for Pemberton and District. We will also be seeking funds to find innovative measures to meet the short-term needs of overcrowding at the Pemberton Healthcare Clinic. So I'd first like to introduce Dr. Jim Fuller, the past medical director for Pemberton Healthcare Centre.
Is it okay to stand up? Okay, just work a little bit better in the upright. So it's really nice to meet all of you guys, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I'm one of the physicians in Pemberton. I've been living here and working here for 8 years. I'm very proud to work in Pemberton. We have a really great team. I think the local community gets a great service. One of the really cool things about Pemberton is all of the physicians cover the GP clinic and also the emergency department. So we also work closely together. So I think that really allows us to have quite a sort of holistic overview of the community and a kind of equal stake in not only the business of the GP clinic, but also the business of emergency medicine. We don't just look after Pemberton, we look after the wider area. So that's Pemberton, Burken, Darcy, and the First Nation communities, some of which are quite sizable, of Mount Curry and the Quaqua, Shamrock, Scatine and Tapella. I think it's fair to say that the Pemberton physicians and nurse practitioners have a very strong sense of vocational duty to our patients and our communities. We're proud of what we do. We care about our patients. I'm going to use the example here of a lot of family physician offices in the city, and even in Squamish and Whistler, they close their lists. They get to a certain level of patients. They say, okay, we've got enough work. We're closing our list. We're not taking any new patients. In the 8 years that I've worked at Pemberton's never done that. We've always said, if somebody's living in one of our communities, they need care. It's not acceptable for us to just shut our doors and turf them because they've got nowhere to go. So as long as somebody lives in these communities, we will onboard that patient to a family physician office. We will look after that patient. So our patient list has grown dramatically. I'd say it's doubled in the 8 years that I've been here. The workload in the emergency has more than doubled in the 8 years that I've been here. We've been fortunate in that we've been able to recruit new doctors and nurse practitioners, which has allowed us to sort of grow and provide that service. But like many clinics, we've been very stretched. I'm sure everybody knows that all of the sea to sky communities are growing strongly. Pemberton is no exception. And there's a census data of from 2016 to 2021, the population of Pemberton increased by 32.4%. There's a lot of development around here. I'm sure Mike can tell you a lot more about it than I can, but over the next 15 to 20 years, Pemberton's going to be growing and the population will certainly double within 15 years, if not in 10 years. And obviously, the bigger the community is, the bigger the demand for medical services is. So we're going to need to grow in Pemberton over the next 15 years. People often say, you're a doctor, you must be so busy, that must be so difficult doing all that work. You're so busy, and that's true. Show me a doctor who isn't busy, right? But sometimes when you're that busy, you're looking after your patients, you've got tunnel vision, you can't see the wood for the trees. And it's only recently that I've kind of come up for air and become aware that our medical centre is busting at the seams, like the emerge is full. The emergency department used to do things like blood transfusions, IV infusions. Say you've got rheumatoid arthritis and you're on an IV medication, you need it once a month. The local people used to be able to come to our emergency department and get that infusion, but Vancouver Coastal Health have stepped in. They've made what I think is essentially a pragmatic and sensible decision to say there's too much emergency work going on, so the emergency has to be saved for emergencies, and all of the IV infusions and blood transfusions that we used to do have to go to Squamish ambulatory care. The Whistler emergency has been told the same thing. So there's no more IV infusions or blood transfusions other than emergency in Pemberton and Whistler. That's all gone to Squamish. So if you happen to live 2 hours north of Pemberton, you've got a 3-hour drive to go get your IV infusion or your blood transfusion. The emergency department's often full. We have 6 clinical examination rooms in the GP office. We have 7 doctors. We've just recruited another one, so we're going to have 8 doctors come August. We've got 2 nurse practitioners. We've got 2 trainee doctors, and we have a number of visiting specialists from the city. A lot of these colleagues have joined since I've been there 8 years ago, or over the last 8 years, should I say. Today, in a family physician office of 6 consult rooms, we have 3 specialists from the city. We're overbooked. Our manager kind of screwed up a bit, but we've got a general surgeon, a geriatrician, and an OB/GYN in the office today. So that leaves 3 rooms for the GPs. I was seeing patients in a broom cupboard today. I think I did a great job.
You look a little dusty.
So I apologize to bringing this problem to you at a late stage. It forewarned is forearmed, and this is a late stage kind of crisis request. to say we need a new we need vastly expanded premises, because we need, not only do we need to deal with what we've got to deal with right now, we've got to deal with the next 15 to 20 years as well. So the existing building was built in 1977 when the population of Pemberton was 254. So how I see the future, if you will, I think there's a long-term goal of a new medical centre, which is going to be at least double the size of what we've got at the moment. So rather than 5 emergency beds, we would have 10 to 12. Rather than 6 family physician offices, we'd have 12 family physician offices. The mental health, the community nursing, the public health nursing, all share the space. Mental health are overspilling into the community centre and a physiotherapy office already. So we need to take into account all of the different departments when planning a significantly expanded new building. And then there's the short-term goals, like what can we do to bridge the gap, because I'm aware that you can't click your fingers and get a new medical centre. So there's going to be a lead time. I'm not sure how long that would be. And then what are we going to do while we're waiting for the new medical centre? We have 2 ideas of a short-term strategy from the family physician office, which is quite critical. We could rent another building somewhere, but where's the money going to come from for that? We could get some sort of a mobile unit, but again, where's the money going to come from that? How can we strategize? There is another idea which you may be interested in, and certainly Whistler may be interested in this as well. As I've said, the ambulatory care, which is your IV infusions, your blood transfusions, that's all been told to go to Squamish. One of our new doctors in Pemberton came from Masset on Hyde Y, and she used to run a sort of very small rural chemotherapy unit. At the moment, all of our chemotherapy goes to Squamish or the city as well. So she is interested in providing chemotherapy in Pemberton. That's quite a specialist business. You need specialist equipment. You need this extractor hood for mixing up the chemo. So one possible idea for coping with demand would be to plan a chemotherapy stroke ambulatory care unit for Pemberton. It would be small. My colleague would be in charge of it, and we would do IV infusions, blood transfusions, and chemotherapy for Pemberton and surrounding communities. And why not serve Whistler as well? I mean, if you're in Whistler, I guess it's 45 minutes to Squamish, it's 30 minutes to Pemberton. You know, they probably don't mind going to Squamish so much, but there's a lot of the surrounding communities that really object to going to Squamish, and sometimes actually don't go because it's too far. You know, it depends on your circumstances, how sick you are, whether you own a vehicle or not, whether you can afford gas or not. Yeah, so it's, I'd like to work with you guys in a sort of contributory teamwork way. You know, any ideas you have, I'm keen to listen. You know, my experience of kind of planning and executing, you know, large infrastructure projects is practically zero. So any ideas, any help? But I would like to just not just plant a seed, but try and encourage us to think about the future and plan ahead and start making things happen. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any questions? I see Dr. Run.
No questions. Thanks to both of you for coming. Both Director Mack and I encouraged both Marnie and Jim or Dr. Fuller to come and see us today to hear the story, and also to let you know, my colleagues on this board, that as we are finally starting the master planning process with VCH after a gazillion years and a lot of pushing on behalf of this board and others, this is going to be a very big point for me. I believe Director Mack and I will, through this master planning process, will be very, very much encouraging the expansion, the significant expansion of the Pemberton Clinic as a focal point in the master planning future of health services delivery here. I'm going to be hammering this point a lot. You guys know I like to repeat myself. I'll be repeating myself a lot on this one. You know, Jim mentioned that, you know, it was built in the 70s, population was 250. Our population of Pemberton alone has gone up 1,500% in that 4 years, 45 years. And that doesn't even factor in, you know, Area C, Lillooet, both which are growing as well at a considerable rate. So our clinic is not just the Pemberton branch, it's the hub for our area. We have, as Jim mentioned, you've got folks that have to drive 3+ hours, difficult hours to get to Squamish. They can't get some of the services in Pemberton or Worcester. They got to go to Squamish or even LGH to get their healthcare needs looked after. There are a lot of folks in our area that cannot make that drive. They don't have access. As we know, we don't have regional transit. So there's a lot of people that just aren't bothering to get the care they need. It's not just a matter of them having to jump through hoops. They're just not even bothering to try to get the care because it doesn't seem accessible to them. So again, I'll be reinforcing this point at the table with VCH in a much more well, you know me well enough, in a much more colorful way to make sure that we're heard that this really needs to be addressed in the next year. So I'm hoping that that as part of our work with VCH on the master planning, that the board will support us on this and sees the need for it. The other side of it is, as mentioned, is that's going to take a while. We know that, and there are some short-term needs that can serve as bridges or stop gaps in the meantime to provide some of the services our practitioners are trying to provide. So I've asked Jim and his crew to prioritize a little bit to see what those needs might be and to bring those forward to this board to look for potential funding, be it, you know, I like to think VCH should fund a mobile unit and not this board, but if there's other stopgap funding that might be helpful for them to do the work that they're doing, I'd like this board to consider to our existing budget. So just want to reinforce and also say, and not just because I want to gush and there, we are so lucky here in Pemberton to have the group of people that we do have looking after our healthcare. Like ridiculously lucky. When I hear stories of other communities, I kind of put it down, my head down on one of these, because we are really well served by our people, but so underserved by our facilities. So we've got the right folks here and we don't want to lose them because they can't do the job that they want to do at a professional level because they don't have the facilities. So you'll be hearing more from me on this. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, I just echoing what Mike said. You never want to follow him because there's nothing left to say. But I've had the fortune to use your emergency room a few times. My wife has, and the service has been unbelievable. So I thank you for that. You guys do an absolutely amazing job. And it's just, yeah, it's amazing. We are so fortunate, as you say. So what we have to do as a group of people here, we have to support these asks and make sure that Vancouver Coastal Health is fully aware that this is serious. You know, as we said, so in 77, there was 250 people here. Now with the whole area, we're probably getting close to 10,000 people. We've got the groups down the lake. You add all those numbers in, and I'm sure there's people from Worcester that would love to come this way and maybe do so. So we really need to put the pressure on Vancouver Coastal Health and make sure they understand what the situation is. Because like I said, even if they were to say today, yeah, we're fully in, it'll probably take 10 years for them to get something built if we're lucky. So we got to think about that. I'll be too old when I'm 85, right? 86? Oh my God. He's gonna keep me around till then. So, anyways, thank you so much.
Well, I think, thank you, and thank you for that presentation. This is maybe more to my colleagues than our guests, and just for me to wrap my head around what we have to do. because the sense I get from some of the other conversations about the MRI scanner and so on, it seems even when the community is willing or able to do fundraising, come up with the capital costs, we still can't put it, make use of it because we depend on VCH to do funding or grant their permission or something. And so I wasn't entirely sure going into this if the ask was more of a funding ask, and it seems like it's really more of an advocacy and pushing VCH, because the sense I get is that even if we were to say sort of nuts to VCH, we'll just raise the funds and pay for it ourselves, like we're still stuck waiting for VCH to. So is that really what the big barrier is in this is VCH, and so that's where all of our focus needs to be?
All right.
I'll recognize you.
Thank you. Get your head down. It's all good.
I'm just being coached here.
So I think there's two parts to it. I think, yes, a big part of it is the advocacy and making the case for the fact that Russell just said it was built in 77 with 250 people. We're reaching 10,000 and we're going to be at 15, 20 before we know it. So it's just it's ridiculous that to think that the existing facility can serve that kind of expansion. It just can't. So a big component of it is the advocacy bit to VCH, the hopefully collective support to say this should be a cornerstone of your master plan. And I know there's more, and I know we got to talk about SGH, and I know we got to talk about, there's lots. I totally recognize that. But I believe this needs to be a cornerstone of that master plan. So I think a piece of it is the advocacy. The second piece of it, because your point is right, sometimes we look at equipment and we can't fund, we can't house. But the second component would be getting there. So again, looking at the next, we'll call it 10 years, and how we continue to serve, or how they continue to serve the public over those 10 years. And maybe there is some funding, maybe, I don't know, that can be supported through this group and fundraising and whatever, to help bridge the next 10 years while we look towards a new facility. So I think there's two pieces, Chris. I think there's the advocacy bit, and then there's the short term. Do we need to throw some dollars at a few elements on some outdated equipment, on some minor expansion? I don't know what. I think that Jim and his team need to sort of provide, a little bit more, clarity in terms of what some of those short term needs might be. But I think there will be some funding requests behind it as well.
Here. That's right. Could I ask a question of Director LaFrance?
Absolutely.
Suzanne, this community gas tax fund, are those funds available for this kind of stuff?
Not to my knowledge. Normally, those are restricted to local government services outside of the healthcare provision, which is more of a provincial service. So I'll double check just right now, but I don't believe gas tax funds can be used for healthcare facilities.
Okay, if you would check, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. I think one of the pieces that I'm thinking a lot about is coordination, and not just around the master planning process, but as we go into it, because it seems to me that, and I don't know how well we understand VCH's goals in this, but it seems like centralizing some things at Squamish, centralizing some things at Lionsgate is strategic on their part. And I feel like maybe as healthcare units, Pemberton, Squamish, Whistler, we should be, understanding that in some depth. And I'm sure that that'll be fed into the master planning process as well. But I always think it's important understanding the organization we're working with and what their priorities and intentions are as we go into anything. Because we have huge needs at the Squamish Hospital right now. I think we all agree on that. And I don't know what kind of resources VCH is intending to bring to the master planning process. I don't know to focus new services, but That I think that would be really important to understand. So, yes. If there was an ask for some of the money that we have been saving, to me, these kind of opportunities are the ones that we want to look at, things that are local priorities rather than things that are replacing pipes in VCH facilities, which is their job to do. And so I'm excited about this kind of thing, but I don't know what their strategy is, and I don't know if we've really talked to each other about what our strategy is as we approach it, so.
No, your doctor, if there's a director, I think.
I'd like us all to be called doctor.
Created, thank you very much for the presentation, for bringing this forward to us, and as well as your work from day to day. And I understand that tunnel vision of just sort of working through it, and I really appreciate that. The concept of not turning anyone away, I think, is really important. I know in my personal experience in Squamish, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I received a breakup letter from my doctor's office saying they could no longer serve me because my doctor retired. And in my opinion, I was a client of their clinic, not of a doctor. I just went to see whoever was there. I wasn't as concerned for myself. I understood the conditions, but I called my mom to see if she'd received the same letter. So I don't have a family doctor, and I've been going to that same clinic since I was born, and that's where my mother had been going. Essentially the same as well. So there's a dire need for services, for facilities to perform the services, and kudos to you to be able to maintain that standard of servicing the continuing to service the community in the face of the lack of facilities or funding to achieve facilities or whatever the roadblocks, the many roadblocks are. So I think we're all really excited about this. Be cautiously excited about this master planning process, and you're doing an excellent job of advocating for your needs. And I know that Mayor Richmond is going to do that as well as I would expect all of us to do around this table, so we can take that regional approach to this issue, because it does affect what happens in Squamish, has a knock-on effect here, and whether the needs are being met inside Pemberton has a knock-on effect down to how it loads up, the Squamish and points beyond. So I do think that this entity here should play a crucial role in informing whatever that those steps forward are. Now, those steps forward are unlikely to be timely enough, and whether they're even in the right direction, I don't know. So I'm curious to see how we as a group can work together to find the responsible and appropriate steps to help bridge that gap in a responsible way. But I don't know what that is quite yet. It'll come to light here as we progress through that process.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And just picking up on what my colleagues have said, and from what I have seen and trying to wrap my head around this, but it seems that we should be I think we are the ones to convene a table of the Squamish and Pemberton and Whistler practitioners to decide our strategy to work on that. Because I see VCH meeting with Squamish practitioners or Pemberton practitioners, but as a whole, Sea to Sky regional health region, like, isn't that our job to convene that table, or our opportunity at the very least? And so is that our next step here? Very good.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good question. I'd just like to step in and make a comment on that. I remember one of the first meetings I came to where VCH were presenting or asking or whatever. And the real attitude I felt that I got from them was that their whole focus was down Lionsgate in the city. And we were expected to find ways of getting there. They seem to think of this as a sort of a rural area that wasn't that important. That's the impression I got. And they've not done much since then to change that impression. And so when I hear Mike's talk, getting in there, and yeah, I think that's really important. And to Chris's point, I think this is the board that has the opportunity to pull groups together. You know, with the Cedar Sky Hospital District. This is not your problem, this is our problem. And I think we need to look at it that way. We need to look at Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton as a regional area. We need to talk about how we can support each other with services, because there will be some things that maybe happen at Whistler and don't happen in Pemberton and Squamish. Now those kinds of sort of cooperation opportunities are there. And we also, we shouldn't forget, we have the ability to tax. And maybe that's something we should consider when we're looking at this, ways to provide some money immediately. We can't do it right now, this year, I don't think. I think we're past the point, but maybe we're not. Can ask Suzanne that. But we do have the ability to raise funds beyond what we've already raised if we decide that that's a priority for us. Sorry, I jumped in there, Jackie.
I was interested in Director Pettengill's line of thinking. Do you meet with physicians? Is there a group of physicians that meet around the Cedar Sky that understand that VCH connects with and shares their vision for this region, and that you can ask questions and that you understand what, like, was this ambulatory care decision described and explained and the strategy behind it clear to a group of doctors who talk to each other?
I mean, the ambulatory care decision, I mean, we were told about that. It was decided at the VCH level and we were told about it. I mean, I personally kind of agreed with it. I mean, I kind of wouldn't have designed it because I don't think I'm that kind of harsh. Or maybe I'm a bit soft and want to try and bend rules and help the patients. But I can see the logic, right? You've got a 5-bedded emergency department. If it's full of people having broken legs, heart attacks or whatever, you just haven't got you can't just give one of those beds to somebody has a chronic illness rather than an acute illness and allow them to have their IV infusion. So it pragmatically makes sense, but, you know, rather than just, oh, we solved that problem because we moved it to Squamish, you know, it would be nice to build something new in Pemberton to definitively solve that and also not overload Squamish with work from this end of the corridor.
And is that a conversation that is there a group of doctors who meet and talk about that?
There's not. I mean, I was the medical director for 6.5 years in Pemberton. I've handed that over to a colleague now. But the latter 3 years of that were, there was a much better vibe and collaboration with different sites. So I got to know, you know, the Whistler medical director, Fern. It was Bruce Moore initially and then Fern. I got to know the Squamish medical director, Steve Masselink. Rua Reed was doing it for a while. I got to know some of the other Lionsgate guys. There's one of the issues, I think this is health authority wide, it's not just a VCH problem. There can be quite high turnover of management. So you get told, hey, there's a new acute care manager for Cedar Sky, you know, come and meet this person. It's like, oh, hi, great. And then 6 months later, oh yeah, such and such got a job in a different health authority. And now there's a new acute care manager for Cedar Sky. And, you know, it's, oh, okay, hi, great. You know, let me tell you what my priorities are. And they're all super keen. And then 6 months later, you know, they've then siphoned off somewhere else. And it's just this sort of merry-go-round or whatever you call it. And I mean, for example, two years ago, I said to Sean Parr, who was the COO of Vancouver Coastal Health, I said, Sean, we need a new building in Pemberton. And he he's a super nice guy. He was like, yeah, you know, I hear you. And then I get one of these sort of round robin emails. Yeah, Sean Parr is leaving us. He's accepted a job somewhere else. I didn't know where it was. And you know, people are moving on so much. They deal with what's right in front of their face, but they don't get to deal strategically with stuff in the tomorrow in tray because they're just too busy dealing with the today in tray. So that has been one of the issues. I don't know how you solve that one.
So just one final question. So my perception is, as you said, sort of in passing through your comments, that there's an intention to centralize chronic disease management that would happen in ERs, pregnancies, some of these sort of hospice, a large, all of the hospital services in Squamish, and to be these sort of emergency clinics in Whistler and Pemberton, and anything that doesn't sort of meet that is that's the highest level strategy and approach.
I mean, my interpretation of the removal of we'll call it ambulatory care, which is IV infusions, blood transfusions, that kind of thing, which has been moved to Squamish. My interpretation of that was not, we've been thinking about this strategically for the last 5 years, and we've come up with this really long-term strategic plan. My interpretation of that is, oh God, look how busy our emergency departments are, because essentially not only have populations been going up and there's been a slow and gradual increase of ER work, COVID happens, and then family physician offices weren't seeing patients face to face, so ER work goes up. And then because, not in Pemberton, but in many other communities, and Whistler is one of them, and Squamish is one of them as well, family physician offices are closing. You know, where do you go when you need to see a GP, right? You had your divorce letter in the post. You've got to go to the emergency department. So emergency departments were supercharged kind of by COVID and then by the primary care crisis. And then, you know, there's this sort of kind of crisis management, which, you know, a lot of health authorities, it's just the way they work. You know, crisis management is, you know, we can't fit these IV infusions in. What are we going to do with them? Oh, let's move them to Squamish. Okay, great, problem solved. You know, but it is problem solved, but it's short-term problem solved. And the longer-term solution is to build some sort of a facility, whether it's in Whistler or Pemberton, but I would advocate for Pemberton, not just because I live there, but because there's a lot of communities north of Pemberton that are traveling. So I would advocate for building a new facility, whether you merge it with the emergency department and use it as a bit of an emergency overflow, and you can staff it with emergency nurses, that would be a VCH decision. But that's what I would do, rather than building a different building somewhere else and employing different nurses to work there. You probably want to, in Pemberton, have it as an emergency overflow. So yeah, I mean, of course, we all want to make smart decisions and plan ahead, and forewarned is forearmed. And I'm keen to you know, turn the page and move on to this new project and give it my all.
Yeah, I think.
Is it appropriate for me to do my presentation at this stage, or
Sure.
not?
Let's do that, sure.
Because
Is that it?
it's all resonating with me as well. Just a little bit of background about myself that may influence some decisions. I've played the game with Vancouver Coastal Health for probably 30 or 40 years. For 15 years, I was the chair of the Whistler Healthcare Foundation. And during that period of time was when we fundraised to get the CAT scan facility built. And so I've had quite a bit of experience from the foundation's point of view of trying to work with build relationships with and work with Vancouver Coastal to get projects done. And I feel that the foundations in the coastal area are all in a position and poised to be able to work together, perhaps to facilitate getting more expansion or a new facility for Pemberton. And our own foundation here in Pemberton really sort of suffered during COVID quite a lot. And we've been working for probably a year and a half now to regenerate ourselves. And we're now at a stage to be poised to go out to the community and say, hey, we're still alive. And we've got a major project that we want to push forward to raise money for a new facility. And I think we've got a lot of people who have moved into this community who are just ready to give funds towards a big project that they think is worthwhile, particularly the developers, I would say. Mike, would you? And what the foundation would like to bring to the table now is to be able to have a commitment from your group to say that you would partner with us in a major campaign to raise funds towards the goals of all of the stakeholders in this, which include Vancouver Coastal. But if we wait until they're ready to give us the green light, yes, we can go ahead. It'll be another few years before you get moving. So from my experience in Whistler, getting a CAT scan facility built, you need to kind of step in and get started and show that the community's behind you and that you're ready and willing to add funds and do some fundraising and support getting what we really need. So one of the things I'd like to, on behalf of the foundation, ask, because we're a very small group and we're all volunteers, we really need to have a paid part-time person to help us with our marketing and fundraising and all of those sort of management things that 7 volunteer people cannot really do without some help. So apart from wanting to be able to, with confidence, say when we go out to market that the Regional Hospital District would be one of our partners, that's one ask I have. But the other is, if you could come up with about $5,000 so we can afford to hire someone part-time to really facilitate the communication plan that we've been working on so hard for the last year, and we're ready to launch out into the community. So if you consider those things, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really important to understand, like as Dr. Fuller said, like we've got people up in Darcy, up in the Meadows, and older people that do not, they don't have the ability to get around other than if their neighbor drives them or something. And then we have one individual who has to come in for IV treatment fairly regular and was living in Darcy and now is actually here in Pemberton, but still has to go to Squamish. And, if we could over time get those facilities here, so it's 45 minutes, 50 minutes, say from Darcy to here, but from Whistler to here, it's only 30 minutes. So this to me makes sense to be the hub because of the area and the folks down the lake. For them to get here is probably in some cases a couple of hours. So now to add another hour or more on to get to Squamish, I think that has to be taken into consideration all the time when we're making decisions about this travel time. And how people are able to get around. So I think that's just very important not to lose sight of that. Thanks.
I just want to pick up on points these two directors were scratching at. So we just really quick history, when some of us came into the board, however many years ago, we kind of looked at the funding that was going on at the time, and the majority of funds collected by this board were being directed to VCH, to support VCH initiatives. And we kind of went, hey, this is weird. This should be towards local initiatives. And so it's been a slow shift. It's resulted in us pulling back all funding from VCH until the master planning process has actually happened. So we've been moving in that direction, but at the same time, we've been trying to really understand the local needs. We got health care foundations, we got providers up and down the corridor. And so, you know, Jack was at Director Compton was asking you, you know, is there coordination between you and your counterparts, your colleagues in Squamish and Whistler? So I think there's two parts here. Number one, I think, you know, when the chair's back, and, you know, we can talk about how we gather information from all of you, so that when we walk into, you know, I'm here saying, you know, we got to support the expansion of Pemberton. Again, I recognize a ton of needs that are up and down the corridor. So we want to come in united, understanding that we have not just united, but also a holistic view in terms of healthcare provision in the whole corridor. And therefore what we should really be pushing for. So that's one of the reasons I kind of asked you guys to come here today, was to bring the information to this board so we can get that local knowledge. We're not getting it coordinated yet. So I don't know if with your busy worlds, there is an ability for, you know, for you to connect with your counterparts up and down the corridor to sort of come up with a bit of a collective vision in terms of where we want to go for healthcare as a corridor, you know, because we're making certain assumptions from sitting here, you know, IV, you know, transfusions. I agree with that. I wrote that in my notes. But we're not providers. We know that much. So really understanding what all of you want collectively, or what the best approach is to get the best bang for our buck from VCH collectively. And I think maybe sending our chair and vice chair away, Craig's help to maybe figure out how we organize in an organized way, collect all that information, so that when we hit the master planning process, we're all on the same page, for up and down the corridor. But no, I'll stop there.
I do have an idea as to how that could happen. So there's a body called Divisions of Family Practice, which is province-wide, and it's a way of encouraging doctors and healthcare providers to work together. You get funding to meet and funding for certain projects. Now, what we could do is Whistler and Squamish are part of the Sea to Sky division. Pemberton is part of the Rural and Remote division. This is a historical thing. I mean, it's
Same work authority, but different.
It's like the jigsaw puzzle thing, you know, like why did they cut the piece in that way? I mean, who knows? But I'm sure there's a lady called Monica McDonald who is in charge of the Sea to Sky division, and somebody called Helen Troran, who's her counterpart for Rural and Remote. I'm sure between Monica and Helen, they could figure out a mechanism and some funding to have some sort of a Sea to Sky wide future visioning meeting or event or something or other that could be funded from divisions, I hope. And then interested parties could attend, and it could be somebody could facilitate it or whatever. But I agree. I mean, I'm here banging the drum for Pemberton, and Pemberton's the centre of my world. I mean, you know, there are other communities in Sea to Sky, and I'm aware of that. They're all important, right? So yeah, I mean, definitely open to talking to colleagues in other sites about a future visioning event. I mean, everyone's going to have their own opinion, but I think a collective vision is a great idea. So
I just follow up on that. I think if we could leave you with that thought, and then if there's support required from this board to help facilitate that, I feel like you would, speaking for myself, I would support supporting that gathering. Not to put pressure on it, but we are finally about to start the master planning process, I think, by the sounds of the conversation coming up. So the sooner,
It's a good time.
it is a good time, and the sooner the better. I wouldn't want to see this 8 months from now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and if there is some support to make that happen, that maybe we could help facilitate,
Yeah.
please let us know.
Yeah.
And I would say, you know, doing the same from a local side with your team, saying, hey, here's, you know, back to the Band-Aids and the bridges.
Yeah.
Here's some of the Band-Aids and bridges we need to keep providing the level of care we want to provide. In the meantime, I would suggest those two.
I mean, I can write an email to those two people that I mentioned, and I copy you in and see if it goes.
I think it's great idea. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, it just is, I'm mindful that we're not the body that oversees or has decisions to make as far as healthcare is concerned. We have some budget that we have the opportunity to spend, and that it is VCH that does these decisions. And so it seems to me that what you suggest and what I'm eager to do is to be as prepared as we possibly can when we go into the master planning agreement. We've talked to each other, we understand what we all value. We understand where there may be some disagreements between our communities. I think that would be really useful to understand. We understand what or at least we have an idea of what we think VCH's strategy has been. I do think that ambulatory care decision reflects what I've been watching VCH do over the last 15 years, which is move everythh south. Like from Squamish to Vancouver and from Pemberton and Whistler to Squamish. And so it did seem like a strategic-ish move that related to where they'd come from. But if you're able to get some coordination done, I think we will benefit from it, so that when we do go into the master planning work, we understand each other a bit better. But yeah, we don't have we don't direct any of this. And I think it would be too bad if there was a sense from people that are participating today that we could make a decision about whether or not, you know, there's a clinic expansion in Whistler or in Pemberton. We will be a part of a master planning process where we say, we really think there should be a Pemberton, you know, clinic expansion or whatever, and then VCH will make that decision.
Yeah, so I guess where I am is, I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it is our responsibility to convene the table and pull everyone together. We have some funds, but I know everything is restricted on how you can and can't use it. I'm not fully clear on the line between the regional district budget and the regional district hospital board budget, and therefore when and how we can change spending, and does this have to go into a bylaw for next budget? So just, I guess what I'm hoping is that staff can bring to us, or someone, you know, how do we convene a table? What is our capacity to hire staff or dedicate staff in the next year? Does it have to be next budget cycle realistically? Just understanding what our options are to get that moving. Yes, so start there. So I don't know if that needs a resolution or.
I just, yeah, no, never mind.
Do you want to go ahead?
No, you're going.
Okay, just in response to that, if the board was to ask staff to do some scoping of what role the board might play to support an informed engagement in the capital planning process, as one of many voices, but not the lead voice in terms of the expertise of practitioners and the experience of foundations, but look at it from how might we convene or play a positive role in convening, then I think that would be, like, to me, that seems like a sensible place for us to start to support the board. Not to step on anybody's toes or do anybody else's job, but to understand what that, like, I'm just trying to get my head around what that system looks like. Who needs to be engaged to make sure that that capital planning process is as effective as it can be from the regional perspective, from the municipal perspective. So it will be conversations with municipalities as an example. But I think that would be a reasonable direction.
Okay, and just an additional bit of context, I did pull up the Regional District Hospital Act, and it talks about our purpose is to establish, acquire, construct, reconstruct, enlarge, operate, and maintain hospitals and hospital facilities to grant aid for the establishment and requisition, construction, large and blah, 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 of hospitals and hospital facilities. But it seems like despite all that, we depend on VCH to do all that. So I'm a little bit confused. And so just a little bit of understanding of like, yeah, where do we?
We don't do that. Yeah, that's not, I mean, that's not a mandate that sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so, and, you know, maybe I guess,
Yeah.
I guess maybe I'm getting a bit of putting myself off track. So just understanding our capacity to convene a table is the more immediate thing. But yeah, and then I'm a little bit confused about. Yeah, it seems like we should be able to do a lot and move a lot of things forward, but yet we can't. So maybe we need even a bit of a 101 on, or I need a 101 on hospital, regional hospital.
Yeah.
Boards.
Right.
I think Greg's thought process in terms of a starting point is solid. I think one of the things we've struggled with, because we've been talking about this in different forms for a little while, is how can we do that? It's so spread, you know, our providers and supporters are so spread apart, and like I think we've struggled to bring that together. So I feel like there's merit in doing exactly what Craig said, but at the same time, I still encourage that sort of coordination that was talked about a few minutes ago. The more that our local healthcare providers can coordinate before we even get into this room while we're preparing it, I think the better. Like we're, you know, again, we're finally here at this master plan process, almost at the door. So we need to be organized. So I think the more that physicians and providers and healthcare boards are able to organize and sort of align themselves while you're doing the work you suggested in terms of how we convene a table and what that looks like, I think the better, as opposed to trying to convene it all from scratch at our own table, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I'd like to see that work started. I'd like to see Jim leave here and make that call tonight and get that process going while you set forth those steps as on behalf of the district. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It certainly does to me, because we're not the, like, as has been stated, we're not the experts, and the sooner the experts are having those conversations, the better for.
I tend to agree with Chris here with what you just read. It sounds like we have potentially a lot of sort of leeway of what we can and can't do. But maybe we do need to have hospital district 101, you know, have staff look into this and see exactly what our responsibilities are. And we have this money that we keep putting aside. What can we spend it on? Let's find out what we can and can't do. I think because we've never had that explained to us the time that I've been here. So I think that would be a very valuable lesson for all of us.
Just to add to that, so just having come from, and I know the chair and the vice chair of the committee aren't here, but having come from a meeting with Director Stoner, that would be, I think, a really useful exercise for everybody, because VCH's perspective of what you described is completely different. And so just being aware of how those conversations start and roles and responsibilities would be really important, because they essentially, as they described it, view us as, you know, we're here now, we're asking for this, please pay your part of the bill. It's a completely different perspective.
Oh, totally.
Their processes are built on that.
Totally. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to do two things. One, work with the chair and vice chair to come up with a strategy in terms of convening a table with CSky healthcare providers to understand priorities. I guess we should do two separate, shouldn't we? Let's start with that.
Second. Any questions, comments? One question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And the second motion would be to direct staff to come back with, you know, at our next or at a future hospital board meeting or district board meeting with a bit of a report so we can have a conversation on the true roles and responsibilities of this board and how that interacts with VCH. I don't know if you need a motion on that or you just want direction to bring that back, but.
That would just direction.
Yeah. No motion.
Okay.
Just to add to that last point, I think for me, that's where I would sort of look to gain some of the understanding about, you know, this ask of $5,000. Is that within the current funds we have to do a new service area for that, or just sort of understanding that piece, and we can make that.
Yeah, we'll add the financial piece and
I just wonder if I could ask Suzanne to comment on the funding or what we can. What we can't do.
Yeah. Traditionally, the hospital districts are providing funding to the province for their capital. We don't own any of the hospitals. It's all provincially owned, but we tax our tax base for these capital expenses. So it's strictly for capital that we exist, and usually it's a 40% amount that we submit to the province. VCH is the health authority for the province for our region. So it doesn't include hiring staff or contractors or it being a part of the capital fundraising or anything like that. The staff of the hospital district are the staff of SLRD, so there's no additional hiring available. And so, yeah, we're limited to funding capital items. We can fund non-traditional capital items like we have in the past. They just have to be designated as a health authority, designated as a health hospital medical building. And so we've done that for a couple different projects outside of VCH's request. So we did the hospice in Squamish, and we did the Whistler trauma rooms reno. Even though VCH was kind of involved in that, it was not a VCH project. It was just from the Whistler Health, the foundation in Whistler that requested these funds as well. So there's some limitations, but I'll definitely dig into this deeper and build a report for the board so it's all laid out for what the hospital district can do.
Can I just follow up on Bill's question then, Suzanne? So if there was a cost involved in convening a table and setting this sort of conversation up, that's something we could fund through this board budget, right?
I don't believe so, but I'll double check. I don't think those kind of expenses are normally part of the hospital district, but like I say, I have to double check on that because we've never done that before.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne. Any other questions for Suzanne? No. Okay. Would you like to add anything else, or would you like to ask us any other questions?
No, basically, I think I just hope that we can partner in whatever's being done, because I think the voice of the foundations in the Sea to Sky corridor is very strong and influential as far as relationships go with Vancouver Coastal. We have a consortium of foundations led by Lionsgate Hospital Foundation, and we meet every 6 weeks or so by Zoom to try and help each other and strengthen the Coastal Foundation healthcare needs, and how the foundations can actually be influential in raising the funds. And I think the latest example that was so very positive was from Whistler, and then getting their trauma room built so quickly because they put so much effort into raising the funds and collaborating with Vancouver Coastal, and the community really stepped up and helped. So I hope we can work like that as a foundation. As I say, we're really regenerating ourselves at the moment, and as soon as we can get ahead with that, then we're really keen to get out there and start raising funds for a major capital equipment and also a capital campaign for a project like a new clinic.
Thank you. As I think about this master planning initiative, I'm leery of leaning on it as the mechanism that brings us all together in the regional context, which I think is extremely important as we look at healthcare. So hearing what I have from Director LaFrance around our ability to fund as this entity to fund that, the creation of a table or so on, I do think that this is the appropriate space for that to happen, and perhaps the member authorities and the member municipalities and the potentially area directors, SSRHD, whatever, could contribute to actually making that happen. But I think this is the entity that really should and could and should be the voice going into that process. So we have some well-articulated goals that are actually pulled out of our communities and looked at it from that regional piece. So perhaps that funding could come from the municipalities. I am quite concerned about a divide and conquer. I don't want to be in Squamish fighting for something that is only in the interest of the community. It just doesn't work that way. Even if it's viewed as a victory, if it doesn't all these pieces don't speak together in a sensible way. So I just wanted to put that out for my colleagues. There could be an ask for, it feels like an ask forthcoming for some funding through our various local governments to get that happening. But it does make sense that this is the space for that conversation to happen in advance of that, because I think relying on VCH to be the entity that brings us all together doesn't feel like a path to success.
I'm just going to follow that. I mean, this might sound a bit negative, but sometimes you have to put a gun to the head of VCH to get them to do anything. Any advocacy that you guys can give us in Pemberton to bring VCH to the table, because it's just, oh yeah, we're going to get onto that in the master plan, and I've been hearing that for 2 or 3 years, and I'm a bit more optimistic that it is coming soon. But I mean, still, it's so any advocacy that you guys can give us in Pemberton with VCH for expanded facilities, it would be very appreciated.
It's unfortunate that Chair Ford and Director Stone aren't here. They've been doing all of this work, and we're all saying the same things, and we all agree with each other. And I think that I feel more optimistic about the work of this group by their work in the last year than I think I have in 11 years of sitting on this board. And so I think we're all saying the same thing. We all agree that we want to coordinate before we go into the master planning process. And I think we're in a good place. So I acknowledge we're all saying the same thing. And I feel like we've all been like vociferously agreeing with each other. I just want to repeat that I really agree with what the last speaker said.
I do have one more comment, and it's not a repetition. It's not a repetition.
Does it agree with me though?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
I didn't even listen. I would suggest, I do agree that the foundations have a ton of influence and amazing ability to raise funds. I would suggest before the foundation goes out and says, we're going to start raising capital for a new facility, although it shows the drive that we have locally, it takes a bit of the responsibility away from VCH already. I would like to hear what they're going to do for us first, and then have the foundation say, that's not enough. We're going to raise some funds to help make it even better. As opposed to the foundation going, hey, we're going to go out and raise them. It's a lot of money anyway, but we're going to go out and raise out a bunch of money. Yeah, so to me, it should be you folks with the great work you do should not be spearheading it. You should be adding to it. They should be spearheading it. So I think you should wait a little bit before you jump out on there. That's just my thought.
So I'm going to make a fun.
Yeah, so we're out of time.
Yeah, we did some work in a little village in Mexico, a very fractured community, and various people there managed to pull things together, and they came up with a slogan. It was "Juntos somos más," which means together we are more. And I think that's not a bad little slogan for us to think of here, because I think when we go into a meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health, they have to know, they have to feel that they are dealing with a united group that is concerned about the whole sea to sky. They can't come in and just pick you off and deal with Pemberton and then deal with Whistler and deal with Squamish. We are together. And if we work together, we can do a better job than we can individuals. And as I said a bit earlier, it's not your problem, it's our problem. And that's the way we have to look at it. So, we'll move on. Thank you very much for coming. And,
Thank you for listening to us.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
And Mike's going to be contacting you. When you're going to send it.
I'm going to email you before the close later then.
Okay. Oh, what have you got? You got a consent agenda or something?
No, it's.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just the minutes from the February.
Oh, this one, that's number 6. Okay.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second. Mac. In favor, opposed, motion carries. Number 7, business arising from the minutes. I didn't see any. Hear any? The CAO's verbal update. Nothing, Chair, thank you. Request for decision approval of the 2022 Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District audited financial statements. Moved.
Very exciting.
Moved by Richmond, seconded by Matt. Suzanne, do you need to say anything to us? No?
Nope.
Question, all in favor? Start number 9, directors' reports, chair's verbal report. Okay, settle back, it's gonna take me a while.
I was excited about this item.
Yeah, I bet you were. Decision on late business. There's no late business, there's no directors, no motions. Who'd like to move the German? Oh.
Yeah, Phil, fun.
Let's go. Want you to talk about the pills again?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
Damn, I missed it.